Hi, everybody. I'm Pam Harland, and I am here because I want to share a slide deck that I've been working on about why we need to make changes, get ready for the future for our students in our libraries and computer labs and entire schools. So I'm going to share my slide deck with you. Here it is. Share screen. All right. I'm Pam Harland, as I said. I'm a faculty member here at Plymouth State University. I coordinate the library, media, and the EdTech integrator programs. I've also been a school librarian and an EdTech integrator for the past 25 years. I'm on Twitter at Pam Librarian, and I'll be glad to respond to any questions or comments you make about this discussion and beyond. So feel free to tweet at me. I've titled my slide deck, Why We Need to Change, but I'm really here to talk about how developing a culture of future-forward collaboration and resource sharing is not only an option, but in my opinion, it's mandatory in schools today. And so I'd like to start off with some history. We know this, that in the 1900s, basic literacy skills meant that we could read, write, and do math. That's what was important. Knowing meant we could memorize, which was completely appropriate to this industrial age of learning and working. Education was very factory-like, one size fits all, everybody in rows, hearing the same content. We were preparing most people to join a very stable and unchanging workforce. And most people were going to work in their jobs probably for the rest of their lives. Most people had just one job for their life. And so let's go even further back, before the 1900s, the beginning of public schools in the US. Public schools have been around for nearly 400 years in the United States, and schools have been the same for most of that time. It's a big deal to ask people to change after 400 years of a model that worked for a lot of people and for a lot of that time. We were all about teaching students to learn a set of information. And we were also about teaching them to comply with our expectations and school requirements. That was a big part of it. Our methods of sharing information have changed over the years, but the model is still very similar. We have a teacher in the front of the class, students in rows organized in the back of the class, listening to the teacher speak. And even this infographic from Edudemic in 2012 still has the teacher in the front, and their kids are behind their desks in rows. These are very fixed and rigid models that are hard to sort of break out of. And this model completely makes sense when learning is about memorizing, repetition, it's about behavior. Schools, and especially libraries, were all about preserving and protecting materials, books, textbooks, tests, supplies. And this was important because information was rare. Information used to be rare. Books were the only way to access most information, and books were valuable commodities for most of history. During the early Middle Ages, there were only 500 printed books in all of Europe. Isn't that an amazing statistic? Preserving and protecting made sense. Also, providing access, but our big job was taking care of those materials. And since then, librarians had to be strict because their primary job was enforcing policies and rules. That was a librarian's job. We had to focus on preserving and protecting those rare and valuable materials. Spending the rest of our time focused on strict cataloging rules meant we could keep our collections in pristine order. When we focused on administrative tasks like sending out overdue notices, that meant we could keep those precious and rare materials on the shelf, also in perfect order. This completely made sense during times when information was rare. And then this crazy thing happened about 20 years ago. 20 years out of all this time that we're talking about is not that big of a historic leap. And we responded to the internet by adding computers into our spaces, which was the completely right thing to do. Libraries and some of our computer labs, those were the first places in our schools with access to the internet. And typing classes became computer labs. We taught our students the same thing. We still taught them how to format a letter or a research paper, but we were just doing it on a different device. And we learned alongside of our teachers and our students. If you're working in the late 1990s, which I was a school librarian, we started introducing teachers to the Google beta site in 1998. And although this was a big change in the world, and those of us who were educators during this time had to change some of our practices, the internet and the tools available, they were more an added feature in our school during those times. But this was the big disruption. About 10 years ago, this other thing started happening. The internet starts to grow exponentially. I love this statistic. It took humans 25,000 years to generate 1 exabyte of data, and now we generate that every 2 days with all of our user-generated content, our tweets and our Snapchats and our YouTube videos. And now Wi-Fi has become ubiquitous, and we have devices available in our classrooms and in our pockets that have access to this whole new world of information. I was talking to a group of educators about this the other day. We talked about when was it that this change that we had to make in our libraries and computer labs and in our schools felt absolutely necessary. And we all decided that it was in about 2012. And then I came across this research that shows that this is the same year when smartphone adoption reached a majority of the United States population. So I think that's interesting. 2012 was this tipping point where most people had a mobile device like a smartphone available to them. This is a steep curve. This happened very quickly, that everybody started getting smartphones. And it's important to keep in mind that the information that we can find on the internet and on our smartphones is often better. It's often better than what we have in our classrooms or on our library shelves. So think about that. That's not a great feeling if you're a librarian protecting the books that are sitting on your shelves. We do know this. This is certainly more current information. Or sometimes it's nearly the same. And now libraries, classrooms, and the web, they intersect. They're offering the same information, but in multiple ways. So we can learn from a textbook. We can learn from an app on our phone. We can learn from a teacher. This is a big disruption in schools. This is the point where we have to change the way we do business. And at the same time, teachers and students alike have become great at consuming all of that information. We can browse and consume all day long. And it's not information in books that are rare and valuable commodities. Now it's our teacher's time. That's a rare commodity. And it's our students' attention. This 2015 study, pretty famous study, shows that humans now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. And keep in mind this, that the research process has changed. It includes not just simple consumables like book quotes, but integrating complex, multimedia-rich sources. Sources that can change reading levels with a simple click. That just would have blown my 2002 mind, right? Think of in 1998 when we first got the Google test site, and now we have things like Newsela. Researching now is finding and evaluating, and then listening, viewing, reading, and analyzing that information. Sometimes it's deciding, what's my reading level going to be before I start reading about this new topic? Can I find a video to explain it before I have to learn something new? Researching takes a lot of thoughtful, complex steps. And literacy now, to be literate in today's society, it includes you can critically think about your own literacy process. What makes sense for me as a learner? Literacy skills also include the ability to solve complex problems with the information that we researched. Knowing now means we can take information and we can use it to answer a question or solve a problem. It's not that we can memorize what the dates of a war were or whatever crazy things that we used to memorize. We can now look that up in a second. That's not what kids need to know today. And students can do all of these things in classrooms, in their homes, on the school bus, at Starbucks. They can type their papers, read ebooks, research projects, plus they can listen to music, chat with friends, make a movie, talk to experts. They could be reading an ebook on their phone and tweeting with the author of the ebook at the same time. So they can do so much more on this little device with a good, strong Wi-Fi connection than they can be doing while they're sitting in a classroom or in the library. So why? Why do we need libraries and computer labs and even schools today? If I have this device with more current information than is available in libraries and classrooms today, this device is interactive. I can access it from anywhere. I can do all these things that I used to need to go to the library or a computer lab for. I have access to some of the best teachers in the world on my device. So why do I have to go to school? What's the benefit of being in that building? These are big questions that keep me up at night, but this is what I think. We provide value to this new paradigm of technology in library instruction by sharing resources and working together on creating a new paradigm for learning in our schools. Some call it a learning commons, an information commons, learning labs. One school in New Hampshire calls it an exploratorium. But the keys are this, whatever you want to call it. The learning commons is the cultural, educational center of the school. It is not just a room of books. This is the place where technology and the library environment meet up and provide students and teachers with space, services, and only practical, relevant, and interesting print and digital resources. We don't host a giant archive of information in our libraries anymore. We only provide relevant and interesting resources for our students and our teachers. This environment is welcoming, it's flexible, and it's comfortable at its core. Welcoming, flexible, and comfortable at its core. It's like the school's living room. Everybody wants to be there. Most significantly, the Learning Commons mindset is about being laser focused on our learners and their needs, even as they continue to change. And the librarians and the tech integrators are working within this space to collaborate and co-teach digital information literacy skills across grade levels and across the curriculum. So that's my vision of a Learning Commons. And I'll make a video next week or the week after about ways that we can make some of these transitions. So very specific methods that we can use to create that transition. So if you have questions, tweet on Twitter at Pam Librarian, and I'll talk to everybody soon. Bye.